Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
Now, going for the rest of the hour, and we'll take some of your calls the last 20 minutes at 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Stefan Molyneux is a blogger, essayist, author, and host of Free Domain Radio. Series of podcasts. He's written numerous articles and essays which have been published at Libertarian, LewRockwell.com, antiwar.com, and he's done over 1,800 podcasts, self-published, and he's coming out with a bunch of books as well. So he joins us today. As promised, I wanted to get him back. Time flies via video Skype, and there's so much to discuss, but in a few minutes I want to play the NBC piece with Geithner over the weekend, where he came out. In fact, I'm looking for the exact quote here. Geithner on Meet the Press and said, for a lot of people, it's going to feel very hard, harder than anything they've experienced in their lifetime now for a long time to come. So he says this is the worst thing in our lifetime. This recovery is so good, Stefan. And if you say this engineered global depression is not a wonderful recovery, you are a conspiracy theorist, Stefan.
It's very sad but true, Alex.
It's good to have an extremist on with us. What do you make of the fireworks going on in the economy, the police state, all the bizarre behavior? I mean, the ruling class is going insane.
Well, you know what it is, Alex? I mean, my training is in history, and it's like a grim rewind to the last days of the Roman Empire. You could slap togas on these guys, and it would be pretty much a frame-to-frame repeat where you get the imperial presidency, you get the continual withering of Congress into a sclerotic kind of money-grubbing, taxpayer-raping kind of institution. So this growth of charisma, this growth of dictatorial powers, this stepping over any last remnants and shreds of constitutional legality is all been played out before, and I hope we learn enough from this phase in history that it's just not going to happen again. We can hope for the best that way.
Well, that's what's horrifying. Anybody that's ever cracked a history book knows that excesses by corrupt elites using government power are legion, and that liberty is the rare jewel that must be defended, as Thomas Jefferson said. I don't think the general public realizes that governments always go to complete excess and turn our wonderful lives into living nightmares.
Well, and another thing that's interesting, what you can see going on in Europe is a very fascinating thing, which we talked about the last time I was on, that when government is at some point restrained or controlled or minimized, all it does is it opens up the free market generates wealth. The government then uses that excess wealth as collateral to borrow more. And so you can see the Irish Tiger of the 90s has now become one of the biggest debt-ridden countries in the EU. Portugal has had a 10-year, very successful end of the war on drugs. You think that would give them lots of extra money? No, they're also going down. Moody has just downgraded Portugal's banks to junk status because we have a war going on between the US dollar and the euro about which one is going to, it's like watching King Kong and Tyrannosaurus Rex go at each other with chainsaws. It's which one is going to fall first, so there's a few extra dollars.
It is like Mothra and Godzilla. Yeah.
That's right. Except the special effects are even cheesier and the subtitles are even worse. But yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. You know that Bin Laden thing was real. I mean, there's no lies here.
And you can see, of course, what happened when they're shipping drugs to, they're shipping weapons to Mexican drug lords. Yet again, we have another example of the people who are supposed to protect us arming our enemies, just as they did with the Mujahideen in the 80s, and just as they did by giving lots of money and aid to the Soviets during the communist era.
Saddam, look, they're using Al-Qaeda against Gaddafi right now.
Right, Gaddafi, and one of the reasons Gaddafi was invaded was he's sitting on one of the largest gold stores in the world, unlike the rest of the countries which seem to be conveniently ignored. If you look at the economic drivers of this current economic collapse, one of the reasons, of course, is that the baby boomers are about to retire, so they have to kill the system because there's simply no money there, so they have to create this emergency in order to get people to accept reduced circumstances. They have to create these wars to create these artificial emergencies and unity. They have to fight against other currencies that are gaining ascendancy in the general fear that the euro or some other currency is going to become the de facto trading currency for oil. If you just peel away the surface layers, it's all about control of fiat currency, control of the population, and of course it's our hope as thinkers and communicators that we can give people this red pill and have them wake up no matter how startling it might be.
Let me ask your opinion or your educated view on this. I didn't know this, but it's been linked on Drudge all day, drudgereport.com. Down in the middle of the article, they had the latest video of the 6-year-old boy being groped once and crying, so they double grope him to really teach him as he's crying. I think my children would cry if this was happening. I mean, they don't like strangers. I mean, that's a normal instinct. But TSA lied to lawmakers, still conducting pat-downs. Why did they say in November and again in April that they're not doing pat-downs? And they said they'd stop doing them. Then they told Congress a month ago that it had stopped, and it's intensifying. I've witnessed it flying recently. What is this tactic of lying? Is it just to set the precedent that they're going to lie in plain view and they don't care?
Yeah, I mean, there's that old joke, how do you know a politician is lying? There's a microphone around. That is the way it goes, that these people are sociopaths. They're pathological. There was a study that was done recently, and it's sort of not funny, though it is funny in a way, which said that serial killers have similar characteristics psychologically to politicians, with the exception that we don't give serial killers aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons, and endless prison systems to incarcerate their victims.
Well, that's actually what's taught, as you know, in high-level criminology, that actually they call them high-functioning psychopaths tend to actually get into government. They don't start killing and stuff until they get that immunity and that power, and that's why the Stalins, the Hitlers, the Maos are the norm in history, and Thomas Jefferson is the exception.
Right, and so one of the characteristics of sociopaths is that they're consistently lying. The second is that they look for whatever weak spot you have and will exploit it for their own gain. And one of the things that's very true of the West, and I think this is very true of Americans, Americans are very, very generous people. They give a lot to charity. They really want to help the poor. And so the sociopaths in power say, you care about the poor, do you? Well, we'll take care of the poor, and then they just raise the taxes. Oh, you care about the sick? Let's raise the taxes so we can take care of the sick. Oh, you want the poor children to be educated? Blah, let's raise the taxes so we can educate the poor. And people fall for this without realizing that these things are just a pretext for increased theft and control.
And we'll give them shots so they don't get sick, filled with cancer viruses.
Yeah, I miss the politicians that had those little pencil-thin mustaches that they could roll, you know, the sort of evil laughs. But, there was a sort of funny joke in England recently. One of the dictators from the Middle East came to visit England, and they wanted to protest. The marching band wanted to protest, so they played the Emperor's theme from Star Wars, you know, bam, 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 bam. I really feel that should be played every time a politician walks into the room. They don't have to wear the black helmet and sound like they've got asthma, but I think that would really help clarify the position of power they have over us. And they should have stormtroopers on either side, just so the kids understand what sort of society they live in.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission this time. Several transmissions were sent to this ship. I want to know what happened to the plans they sent you. You are part of a rebel alliance and a traitor. Take her away. Impressive. Most impressive.
Big Brother. Mainstream media. Government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Join me, and I will complete your training. The Emperor has foreseen this. Give yourself to the New World Order. Hand in your firearms. Submit to carbon taxes for the children and the bumblebees.
Going back to Stefan Molyneux, that's enough from Sith Lord Darth Vader. Mr. Molyneux, this is a short segment. There's so much going on in the world. What is front and center on your radar screen?
Well, I'm really quite interested in the way that the American credit rating agencies have downgraded Portugal's debt and seem to be on the verge of downgrading Italy's debt. Greece was fairly small. It's a very small part of the EU, but depending on how you measure it, Italy is between the third and fourth biggest one on the size economy in the EU. So I think that they're really doing an attack on the euro at the moment to cover up the fact that the dollar is taking such a big dive relative to the euro. So, for instance, the rating agencies in America have said that they're going to look at any voluntary rollovers of the Greek debt, you know, just sort of keep buying more and more, as a kind of default. Yet the fact that the Fed has bought a staggering amount of American debt is not considered a default. America has already defaulted on its debt because it's buying its own treasuries. And so I think that's very interesting.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think that's going to be, I think he's playing a video game while I'm talking, but that's okay. I can talk to the listeners. But no, I think that's really quite fascinating to see these two giant beast-dying currencies hacking away at each other rather than trying to deal with their own problems. Mathematically, the euro can't survive. Mathematically, the dollar can't survive. I don't know that there's much will to try and centralize these things into a larger central bank. I think that that's all kind of exhausted. So it is going to be quite fascinating. I think if we see a collapse of the euro, we might see a breakup of Europe into its more individual currencies, which might stave things off for a little longer. But, you know, I think people just really recognize deep down that the system as a whole, I mean, I think it's already dead. I think it's just doing that after-death body twisting.
I agree, and they sell us a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you look at the Rockefeller Foundation, over 100 years ago, now 111 years ago, they would fund the National Council of Churches to actually teach the end of the world's coming. Don't get involved, you know, do whatever you're told. And now they have 2012 for the non-Christians to think the world's ending so that people just have a foregone conclusion. No, it's the opposite. These elites are pathetic. They can be defeated.
They can be defeated. And to me, the fundamental argument is just waking people up to the violence in the system, to the fact that fiat currency is based on violence. It is based upon a legal and moral attack upon any competing currencies. Gold-based currencies are robbed and threatened throughout the world. Taxes is based on threats and violence. The war on drugs is based on threats and violence. The education of miseducation, indoctrination of the young is based on
Fear will keep the local
violence.
systems in line. Fear of this aircraft carrier. But that's impossible. Who will maintain control without the bureaucracy?
Right. Yeah, there's this weird thing that because the government has a monopoly on something like educating the young, if you take the government out of the equation, somehow the young won't be educated. It's like saying if you take a huge rock out of the middle of a river, that the river is still going to go around the hole rather than fill it in. And that's this weird thing. Because the government does it, if the government doesn't do it, it won't be done. Like there's no history where it was ever done before without the government. Roads were built without the government. The literacy rate prior to government education was far higher than it is now. Now we have this ridiculous spectacle of teachers cheating on tests in order to get bonuses. I mean, it's just sad and pitiful. The same thing which children get thrown out of school for, teachers are getting rewarded for. And this is happening so far throughout the system. There's nothing in the system that is working anymore except propaganda, which is always needed when a system doesn't work. And I just hope that the evidence is accumulating to the point where even the worst addict to state violence is waking up and saying, maybe this stuff doesn't work anymore. That's my particular hope. But of course, addicts are the last ones sometimes to see the basic truth.
Well, that's the other big issue, is they keep drugs illegal so the big mega banks can make bigger profits. When something's a black market, it's more expensive. And I've even heard talk show hosts that are pro-drug war now coming out and admitting the government deals the drugs and that the drug war is a fraud. And so what do you think the system's going to do to try to stop this revolution of awakening?
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to, as they're already doing, they're going to arm more of the drug lords, right? So lots of government weapons are going to find their way into the drug lords' hands. They're going to fund the crackdowns in Mexico and other places. And so this is to fight the example in Portugal, where 10 years of legalized drug use, or at least decriminalized drug use, has resulted in far lower drug addictions, far better treatment for the sick people who are addicted to drugs.
Lower crime.
What they're going to do, yeah, they're going to lower crime, they're going to arm the enemies, and so the enemies then create all of this violence, and then they say, aha, you see, you need us. It's like the doctor who injects you with a poison and then says, I'm the only one with a cure. And that's all that they do over and over again.
Well, Stefan Molyneux is our guest. He's an extremist. He believes 2 + 2 = 4. I've never had such conspiracy theorizing on my show. Your call straight ahead. ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?